It's week 12, folks. Here are your starts and sits. I'm going to start off with the quarterback position and Matthew Stafford. And I get it. He's coming off his worst game in the last month. But I do love the matchup this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Their defense is giving up an average of over 22 points per game to quarterback since week 8. And this could be a high-scoring affair. So stick with Matt Stafford. And I like Jared Goff this week. And I told you not to play him last week, and he had 12 points. Bad matchup against the Eagles. Well, now he's got a good matchup against another NFC East team, the Giants. Their defense has allowed 6 quarterbacks to beat them for at least 20.1 fantasy points, including 5 who've hit that mark since week 6. And in all, Big Blue has allowed the second most points per game to quarterbacks, so Jared Goff at home is a very good play. Quarterbacks that I'm avoiding, Baker Mayfield. And I told you not to play him last week, and the numbers were not great. And I know he's a very difficult player to sit, but let's look at the numbers. I mean, fewer than 17 points in 3 of his last 4 games. And he's got the Rams this week at SoFi. This is a bad matchup. The Rams defense has allowed just 1 quarterback to beat them for more than 10.4 fantasy points at SoFi Stadium. And that includes Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold. So I'd beware Baker this week outside of Superflex leagues. Same thing with Daniel Jones. And he's posted fewer than 16 fantasy points in 2 straight games before the Colts had their bye week. And this is a bad matchup against Kansas City. Their defense hasn't allowed a single quarterback to beat them for more than 16.8 points at Arrowhead this season. And that includes Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, who both scored fewer than 12 points against Kansas City on their home turf. So beware Daniel Jones. At the running back position, and this one's probably low-hanging fruit, but Treyveon Henderson has been on absolute fire. Over 60 combined fantasy points in his last 2 games. So if Ramondre Stevenson is out once again, Henderson should remain the featured back against Cincinnati. Their defense has allowed 13 running backs to beat them for over 15 points, including 7 with more than 19 points. So start Treyveon Henderson and start Ken Walker. I was wrong about him last week. He had his first good game basically since September. And this week he's got the Titans. They've given up 16 plus fantasy points to 6 running backs since week 3, and they're giving up right around 5 yards per carry to running backs. So even though Walker's been bad most of the season, I'll start him as a flex this week. Among the running backs that I am fading, or at least tempering my expectations, Alvin Kamara. And I get it. He's going to be hard to sit. You've got 4 teams on a bye this week, but he has failed to score more than 9.5 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. He's been held to single digits 5 times since week 3. And while Atlanta has given up big games to Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, and Devon Achane, overall, they've been tough against running backs, so I'd beware Alvin Kamara. Same thing goes with DeAndre Swift. He's seen his fantasy numbers decline in each of the last 5 games. Last week, he had a 9-point stinker. He's losing carries and fantasy production to Kyle Monengai, and this week, he's got the Steelers. Since week 6, their defense has allowed just 2 touchdowns and an average of fewer than 18 points per game to running back, so I'd consider Swift a risk-reward flex option at best. At wide receiver, you got to start Tetairoa McMillan. I didn't love the matchup last week. He ended up exploding and having a huge game. Well, now he's got a great matchup against the 49ers on Monday Night Football. Their defense has allowed 13-plus points to 12 wide receivers, including 7 who've gone over 17 points, and 1 had 30 just last week. That was Michael Wilson. So start Tetairoa McMillan and start Zay Flowers. And I get it. He's not putting up huge numbers, but he has given you 11-plus points in 4 straight games, and I think he'll be better than that this week against the Jets. Their defense has allowed the 9th most points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, and they've also allowed 4 wide receivers to beat them for 19-plus points since week 7, so keep the faith. Start Zay Flowers. Among the wide receivers I am fading this week, DK Metcalf. I mean, he's been absolutely awful. Look at his numbers. Fewer than 10 fantasy points in 3 straight games in 4 of his last 5. Aaron Rodgers is banged up. And even though the matchup's not bad against the Bears, I just don't trust the Steelers' passing game right now. So I'm going to fade DK Metcalf where I can. Same goes for Xavier Worthy. I mean, his fantasy stats have really taken a tumble since Rashee Rice's return. And in all, he's averaging 8.6 points per game. It's a far cry from what he was in the second half of last year. He's got the Colts this week. They've surrendered the fewest points per game to opposing perimeter receivers over the last 4 weeks. So I'm fading Worthy this weekend. At tight end, I'm going to start Dallas Goedert. And I get it. He didn't have a good game last week, and his numbers have not been great over the last couple of games, but he's got a good matchup against the Cowboys. And if you remember back in week 1, he had 7 catches and over 11 fantasy points against Dallas. So I'm starting Goedert in this NFC East matchup. I'm also going to start Hunter Henry. He's kind of a streamer this week because I know his numbers have not been great, but look at the matchup against Cincinnati. They have been crushed by tight ends. No team in the league has given up more fantasy points to the position. 9 have gone for double digits. 3 have scored more than 20 fantasy points against them. So if you need help at tight end, start Hunter Henry. Among the sit-em tight ends, and I'm going to go back to TJ Hockenson again. I mean, the matchup's good this week, but how can you play him? I mean, he's been held to single digits in 6 of his last 7 games, and JJ McCarthy is ruining the value of not only TJ Hockenson, but Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison as well. So regardless of the matchup, I just can't play Hockenson. He's getting cut in some redrafts. And I'm also beware of Theo Johnson this week. Now, he had a bad game last week. He had been pretty good in the previous month or so, but he only had 4 targets last week. And the matchup is bad against Detroit. They've allowed just 11.1 fantasy points per game to tight end since week 8. So even though Theo Johnson has been good, I wouldn't cut him. I'm not playing him this week against Detroit.